you find yourself on a long, rather straight road on the east side of Thornton, Colorado, called Riverdale Road. As you drive, you look, trying to spy the literal gates of hell. At least, that's what they say. You see it in the distance, a hulking shape on the horizon, and in front of it, rusted metal gates. Cautiously, you ease your car up to the gates, you exit the vehicle, and you walk towards the ruins of a massive mansion. A mansion that supposedly built in the early part of the 1900s by a man who went crazy upon completion. So crazy that he trapped his wife and children inside and burned them alive, burning the entire mansion to the ground. He disappeared, never to be seen again. You inch closer to the hulking shape. You know that there's supposedly a hidden room beneath the ruins where maybe you can hear a ghost walking up behind you, or the subtle, quiet groans and moans of long dead spirits. You inch closer and closer. You feel the hair on the back of your neck beginning to stand up. You don't feel alone. Someone's there. Someone's watching you. In a fit of fear, you turn and you run back to your car. You turn the car on. You begin to turn around. You look. And in the rearview mirror, you see a woman in white reaching for you, calling out for you. You hit the gas, you speed away, you're flying down Riverdale Road, and you look ahead and you see headlights coming to you. No, 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 not headlights. One headlight. It begins to race towards you, and you feel an urge to turn the car around and to race this vehicle, to race it into the night, no matter what might happen. But your fear overcomes you, and you drive past, and as you do, you see an old Camaro with one working headlight pass you by. The driver raises a skeletal hand, beckoning you forward. But you don't stop. You are done with Riverdale Road in Thornton, Colorado. You are done with the gates of hell. You are done with the Phantom Camaro and all of the many, many spirits that allegedly haunt one of the most haunted stretches of roads in America. Today we're going to be talking about Riverdale Road in Colorado on this episode of Urban Legends Unmasked with me, your host, Chad Lerman. Well, back to our regular episode of Urban Legends Unmasked. Last week, hopefully you enjoyed the on-location and sort of slightly different legend of Alfred Packer. And because we did a little bit different thing for Colorado there, I wanted to do an actual urban legend from Colorado. And honestly, I struggled with this one. I struggled to figure out which one I wanted to do. I almost went with Stanley Hotel. As a writer, you know, there's something that draws me to this hotel that was the basis of one of the greatest horror novels of all time, The Shining. But at the same time, as a writer, I don't really want to pick apart that hotel. I don't want to ruin the mystique that comes along with it. I remember the first time I saw the Stanley, I was in Estes Park, and I could see it on the horizon, and just even from miles away, seeing that white structure on the cliff, knowing the history, knowing that it had come to inspire Stephen King to write The Shining, gave me like goosebumps. So I don't want to take that away. I don't want to demystify that. But I do want to talk about what seemed to pop up on website after website after website when it came to the most haunted or the best urban legends in Colorado. And I want to talk about Riverdale Road because Riverdale Road is not an isolated story. It's like anywhere from 8 to 11 different stories. So I'm gonna talk about all of them today. Some of them rather quickly, but I want us to kind of like look at this and I think for Urban Legends Unmasked to do its thing, we got to kind of ask why. Like, yes, most of these things come from like legends or stories, or there's this moral that we want to look at that teaches people things. But why would there be 11 different legends on a stretch of road that's really not that big? You know, when you pull up a map of Riverdale Road in Thornton, Colorado, it sits on the edge of town. It sits on the eastern side. On one side, you've got neighborhoods, streets, you know, typical layout of a town. On the right, you've got what looks to be kind of like open land. Not a lot of stuff built there. It looks like fields and stuff when you pull up the Google images. In fact, that's exactly what it looks like. Back at the very bottom of this region, and by the way, there is a river that runs sort of parallel to the road. But if you go further down, you'll see there's the Haunted Field of Screams, which, you know, if you're going to go to a haunted house, you might as well, or haunted field, you might as well do it near where there's an actual haunting. That's a good way to go. But it's not something that's typical, you know, that you would see so many different things in one spot. The first legend that we'll talk about, though, really is the Hell's Gate legend. And that's really the story we started out with, that there was this man who built a house. He went mad. He trapped his wife and kids in it, burned them to the ground, and then he skedaddled and got away. Very similar to a lot of other legends, you know, nothing to really verify this. And that's what makes this a very interesting thing. We can find Riverdale Road. Like, it's very easy. If I'm looking at a map of it right now, even as I'm talking to you. By the way, there's an elementary school right by the road. That's not creepy. But anyway, I digress. The point is it's easy to find Riverdale Road. It is not easy to locate the quote-unquote gates of hell. This is something that is not easily found. Even looking at different things, some people claim to have been there. Doing a Google search of the images, you know, I could take a picture of a metal gate and say, look, gates of hell, but, you know, I don't even see a lot of that. So I feel like there's definitely a lot of legend to this, and not a lot of true stuff going on. That being said, there are some who argue that perhaps the gates only reveal themselves to those who are ready to find the horrors that lie within. So I think it would be interesting to find out from the locals, to talk with them. So if you ever visit Thornton, Colorado, or if you're from Thornton, Colorado, feel free, drop us a line, let us know. Like, what do you think? Have you seen the gates of hell? So that's really the first one. And I think that one's the one that kind of gets people very interested because, you know, these rusty iron gates are bad. They obviously, you have a situation where, if you believe ghost lore, a woman and children who were wrongfully killed, they are coming back to haunt. And the woman in white is sort of the second part. So it's kind of connected to the gates of hell. Some people will say that you will see her in your rearview mirror beckoning you. And others will say, you know, perhaps you see her on the side of the road. This runs very similar to other women in white stories. Like, we've seen women in white stories, La Llorona, which is a very famous Hispanic sort of legend or culture. You see it in New Mexico. Arizona even has its own version of La Llorona. So Colorado, why not? Like it's there. It's all around. A wronged woman. They say that she will appear in the rearview mirror, begging for help, but no one ever helps her. So she's doomed to haunt that space forever. There is a story also that a jogger might chase you. Looking at the stretch of road, it's easy to see where it might be a dark road, and if somebody was perhaps jogging at night, it would be very easy for them to get hit by a car. So if that's the case, then somebody who has been, you know, killed in this accident, this horrible accident, might be kind of running along the road. Some people will say that if you're walking the road at night, you might even hear like a deep, deep heartbeat, or even footsteps following you behind. So you might want to watch out for joggers as well along this road. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Camaro. The Camaro, I like this one. I drive a Camaro, although I am trying to sell the Camaro, not because of this, just because, you know, money's tight, whatever. But the point is, there's a phantom Camaro, and it rides along the road. And the argument is that around certain blind corners on this road, it seems to have like spots. It's a fairly straight road, but there are short little deviations in there. So apparently the Camaro kind of zips around. And the legend has it that a driver in the 70s was driving down the road too fast, had a fatal crash. They died. The argument is that one headlight, if you see it, it will challenge you to a race. And if you do accept said challenge, it does not end well for you. I love the lore of phantom cars. Like, there's so many different stories along these lines. I even wrote one as kind of a side Sawyer Shepherd story called The Demon Race, I think, of the demon car. It's been a while since I wrote it. I forgot. It's in my short story book in the tension. But it's basically like, yeah, Sawyer Shepherd is in his car and he's challenged by a demon in a sports car. And there's just something about that. I know there's also lore surrounding other cars too. I think it's James Dean's car. Little Bastard, I think, that is supposedly haunted. I don't know. Great Supernatural episode, by the way, about that with the car. Good stuff there. I enjoy that a lot. I highly recommend that episode. But yeah, I think something about haunted cars. Again, we're kind of lurching into Stephen King territory here. You know, Christine, one of the greatest horror stories about a car of all time. So yeah, I think that there's something to be said for this. Also a very similar legend to something that came out of California in the 60s, 70s, early 80s about gang initiations. That there were vehicles driving along the road with no headlights on, and if you flash them to alert them, then it was a part of this gang initiation. They'd hunt you down, they'd kill you, and they'd become a part of the gang. Made it even into, like, I think the Los Angeles Times did an article on it before they realized that never actually happened. There'd never been any documented cases of that occurring or any actual reports. It was all just legend, and it made the news. So anyway, so cars are scary. Not as scary as Demon Kids, but pretty scary. So the Phantom Road also has a Phantom Camaro. There's always the hitchhiker as well along this road. So basically there's this theory that there is this guy, you see him hitchhiking. Now, maybe this was a bigger danger 20 years ago. I don't know of many people who still pick up hitchhikers. But I will say I was driving home from Colorado a couple weeks back. In the middle of the night, we were in New Mexico, actually. We weren't in Colorado when this happened. But driving outside of Raton, New Mexico, and it's pitch black in the middle of nowhere. And out of the corner of my eye on the side of the road, there's a hitchhiker. And he's sitting, like squatting with his back towards me and his hand stuck out, and he kind of looks over his shoulder, and I about jumped out of the car moving 75 miles an hour. It was one of the, like, it was terrifying. So maybe the ghost from Riverdale Road hitchhiked all the way to Raton. It's a possibility. Either way, hitchhikers terrify me. So if there is a phantom hitchhiker, I am definitely not picking them up. Apparently some people have had a lot of experiences with that. They open the passenger door, they disappear. Kind of another similar story to the other legends that we've heard about. The pick up the hitchhiker, the phantom hitchhiker, you take her home, and then she just disappears. Only to find out that there was someone who looked like that, but they died like 20 years earlier. One of the great legends as well. So it's interesting to me that Riverdale Road seems to boast a lot of these classic legends, at least in their own version. Another one, bloody handprints appear on signs. So that's not good. You don't want to see bloody signs. That's not a good thing there. This legend says that there was a young boy on his way to school. He got hit by a car. Now he paces the street restlessly at night, and he'll reach up to the signs along Riverdale Road and spread his bloody handprint across it. Okay, scary. I think bloody handprints are terrifying no matter what. And actually, I think there may be a connection here. We're going to come to another legend, the one I'm saving for the last. There might be a connection between that and the bloody handprints as well, which is completely explained by human behavior, but also still creepy. So we'll get to that one at the end. There's also legends of ghosts swinging along the trees. Now, Colorado it was a rough town. It was a rough state. I talked about Alfred Packer last week, and of course, the basic idea was that he was a cannibal. He confessed to it, and they wanted him to swing from the gallows, like so much so that the town was ready to build the gallows the day he was convicted. He was eventually not exonerated. He was eventually paroled, and actually exonerated. It was like 100 years later. But some people got together and said, hey, maybe we should forgive the guy because he was just doing what it took to survive. But in any case, Colorado was a Wild West state. It was a place where people took the law into their own hands. It was also a slave state. And so at some points in history, apparently, there were lynchings. There were things that occurred. So you might see ghosts where there's bodies swinging from trees at night. Cottonwood trees, particularly if there's a full moon out. So yeah, lynchings were a thing, whether it was slave lynchings or lynching criminals. That was a common thing out there. So kind of relying a little bit on that Old West legend and something that's there. I think this one's an easy enough one to explain. You can see a lot of weird stuff in trees. Your brain psychologically does this thing called closure. And so it's sort of, again, I think we've talked about this on one before, where you look at a cloud and you see a turtle, but it's just a cloud. But you see a turtle because your brain is wanting to make sense of something. That's what your brain does. It wants to fill in those gaps. And so it might be if you are on a dark, scary road at night, it's a full moon, you look at a tree, your brain plays tricks on you. That closure kicks in, and instead of a cute little bunny or a turtle, you see a swinging body from a tree. Again, that's not a commentary on your psychological soundness. It doesn't say that you're crazy or you're dark or you're demented or a psychopath. It just says that your brain it fills in the gaps. Like, that's it. And sometimes the gaps it fills in are rather weird. So dealing with that fact and moving on from that, knowing if you happen to see something swinging from the tree that's not there, if you see it once, it's probably nothing to worry about. If you see it all the time, maybe have a conversation with a doctor. That's my advice. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about, okay, so this one's actually a connection to the Arizona story that we told a couple weeks back. So the Arizona skinwalkers. So there's actually some arguments that along Riverdale Road, you will see a Native American shapeshifter, which is very closely akin, or actually might be part of the skinwalker tradition. That they'll appear upon the road, they'll appear in different shapes, they may try to talk to you, converse with you. So again, that's back to that skinwalker thing from Arizona where, they'll run along the side of your car and tap on your window, playing tricks on you. Again, I think it's again, a little bit of that closure of your brain. I remember when I was in high school, no, I take it back. I was in college. I was driving home. I had taken my best friend at the time and another friend had gone to see Blair Witch Project, which was opening weekend, jam-packed theaters. This was back in the days before you got like tickets that told you where to sit. So they oversold sometimes. And we get in there and there were no seats, nothing. So we ended up like going up to the balcony area where it's kind of the handicap seating, where they have the like open area where if a person were in a wheelchair, they could wheel up there. And there wasn't anybody there. So we sat there and we got like nauseous, like sick. Because if you haven't seen Blair Witch Project, it's shaky cam. This was back before it was a big thing and it was in all the movies. So we were like getting motion sickness. And the movie really didn't scare us that much until that last scene. And again, if you haven't seen the movie, that last scene makes the whole movie terrifying. Absolutely. The rest of the movie kind of boring. But we're driving home and my best friend at the time lived about 10 miles from me. We lived out in the country. And his house, I had to pass through some wheat fields, cornfields, just big open spaces, pitch black, nothing around, super dark. And I was fine driving him to his house. But when I dropped him off and I was coming to my house, back through the dark clouds and the dark fields and the creepy environment, I think I hit 110 because it was absolutely terrifying. There's something about being in the dark, just that even though it was irrational to think that anything could jump out of the fields and get in my car, that was a terrifying thing. Every little sound, I was jumping. So I can see where a person driving along a notoriously haunted road would hear every little pebble that banged off the side of their car as something tapping on the window trying to get them, like a skinwalker. There you go. So I can see that. Again, my mind was filling in the gaps. My mind was playing closure. I did get home safely, by the way. I did not hit anybody or anything, and no ghost jumped in the car with me. But I also made sure to have him drive the next time. So, take care of yourself. All right, last one. I said that we were going to get back to this one. And this is the last one that's very much a human activity, something that is human related, but is not innocent or benign. There is still repeated and reported demonic activity in the area. Now, I'm not talking about like demons actually like roaming the ground. I mean people who want you to believe or actually do worship Satan. like the classic stuff you would hear from the 80s about the Satanic Panic, that there's graffiti, that there are markings, that there are symbols and symbology that are all around on Riverdale Road. It's one thing when people talk about this. It's a whole nother thing when people find evidence of it, which they often do. Along Riverdale Road, some people had a chicken farm, and there are chicken coops and some empty buildings, and they're often going to be tagged with what would be seen as satanic graffiti. And it's always fresh. It seems to be always there. They often will also find headless animals along the road. So if we look at the graffiti part, that very much could just be some goofy kid trying to scare people, trying to feed into this legend. If you're going so far as to place beheaded animals, we're crossing into, at the very least, some serial killer-esque behavior here. And perhaps even like some actual satanic activity. Again, this is something that was a huge thing in the 80s. I was a little young to really be aware of it too much, but it did bleed over into the 90s where I grew up. And so I remember we were doing a highway cleanup for my junior high one time. And we went under a bridge and we found some stuff, some graffiti that was a little creepy. It weirded us out. There were some strange things there. It was more than likely just a bunch of teenagers being goofy and trying to scare people. Which I think might be what some of this is along Riverdale Road. I mean, if there were a haunted road around, people would probably, know people come to visit. It's a boon for the local economy. People are going to grab a drink at the local, burger place and maybe grab some dinner, while they go look for the scary thing. I don't know. Not a bad idea. Like, push the idea. Bad idea always to sacrifice animals for anything other than like food or clothing. Okay, just on the nose right there. Do not cut the head off of an animal as a prank. It is a bad, inhuman thing to do. Do not do that. Terrible. Okay. So there is actually, if you were to go to Thought Catalog, which has a listing of a lot of these, Thought Catalog actually has a link to a YouTube video from this particular situation where they kind of have some actual recordings of this. And I saved this one for last because I think it is the one that is the most plausible, that you're really going to have the best chance of seeing. Really cool to be able to see the burned out old mansion behind the gates of hell. But since some people can't even seem to find it, maybe not something you can actually go and see. But this seems to be something that occurs and still happens. So you might be able to see this kind of stuff. Is it legitimate? Is it really a satanic worship thing? Or is it just people goofing around? I don't know. That would be something that's a question for a local, to ask someone from Thornton. Is this something that really does occur? What I think is interesting about it, and what really I think if we're going to kind of turn this whole Riverdale Road haunted stretch of highway into an urban legend thing, what is the message of this other than don't go to Riverdale Road after dark? I think the message is that when you have such a concentration of legends in one spot, there's a couple of theories that I have. I think one of them is that people, maybe there a long time ago, had some really creative ideas. They like to tell stories, and it stuck. They heard other stories and thought, hey, this road's kind of creepy. Let's attach some legends to it. Let's throw some things on there. And they realize that people come to see this. Like, it becomes fun. Locals are drawn to this kind of things. Like, it's the idea of seeing people go through these things and experience these things. It can be fun. It can be entertaining. But I think there's another possibility, and this is where, like, kind of for the first time, I'm really going to say I buy into a sort of supernatural element to this. I think that some places have a feeling, have an atmosphere, have an aura, that they're just creepy, that there's just something about them. And maybe it's because a lot of people died in that spot. I once was able to visit a concentration camp in Germany, and I felt a physical presence while I was there. I wouldn't say it was a ghost per se, not by any stretch of the imagination, but I felt evil was very personified and very real. So I do think that there are certain locations, certain places that can hold a sort of power. On a scientific level, our brains still have instinctual things like that lizard brain, that survival instinct. And I think that our brains are able to perceive more than we are able to understand. So I think that we pick up on things. I think we pick up on energies that maybe In the same way that animals can just be like, they can pick up on something. When something doesn't feel right, they take off. And we still have that animal brain a little bit that says, hey, something doesn't feel good. Let's get out of here. But as humans, we rationalize it. That's superstition. I'm going to stay here. And, you know, we make fun of people in horror movies for running towards the danger instead of running away. But, you know, sometimes the animal brain doesn't make sense. You know, sometimes we do things or behave in certain ways that are counterintuitive or anti-common sense. But that's because we're operating on this instinct, this drive of adrenaline that tells us to either fight, flight, or freeze. And honestly, some of us just get them all jumbled. We flight to fight and freeze when we get there, you know, that kind of thing. But again, it also goes back to this idea of why would people continue to go to this road if it's such a terrible place with, like, you know, almost a dozen different horrific spiritual, supernatural entities? Because people want to feel alive. Like, that's what fear is about. Fear makes us feel alive. And so I think that at its core, Riverdale Road, whether any of these things are actually true, they actually happen or not, it does serve a purpose. People who go there are seeking a thrill. They're seeking to feel alive, to be energized by something, to be shocked. They want and don't want to see that white woman, that woman in white. They want and don't want to see that single headlight Camaro. They want and don't want a tap on their window from a skinwalker or a jogger. They want and don't want to see a bloody handprint, which may or may not be a part of the prank that the local, like, quote unquote, Satanists are putting out there. People want to be scared. People enjoy it. That's why horror movies and television shows and horror novels sell like they do. People want to feel alive, and fear makes you feel alive. So if you're wanting a good jolt of shock and fear and terror to creep up the back of your spine, maybe you should go to Thornton, Colorado. Check out Riverdale Road. See if maybe the gates of hell reveal themselves to you. Pick up that weird hitchhiker. Or don't. Either way, it's up to you. Urban Legends Unmasked is going to be moving on to Connecticut next week. So we'll be looking forward to a legend from the first legend, really, from the east of the United States. So we're looking forward to that one. As a reminder, too, just check out several of the books that I've got posted on Amazon right now. We've got Sawyer Shepherd Chronicles. Doesn't have any sort of things like this, but I did mention Sawyer earlier, and one of the side stories and the short story in the tension is about a phantom car. Sawyer is kind of this guy. He would deal this kind of stuff, like legends like this. Also, you can check out Beneath These Brittle Bones, which is my newest horror novel. Kind of a supernatural element, a body legend buried in the woods comes back to life and steals body parts and then turns into something else, and it's goes from there. And then, of course, Killtown is I can officially say this, Killtown is my biggest hit I've ever written. It is a serial killer competition in a small East Texas town. One road in, no way out. Also one of my best reviewed books. So definitely want to check out Killtown if you like some scary slasher type stories, and Beneath These Brittle Bones if you like creature feature, wizards, witches, warlocks, magic, dark magic kind of stuff. Definitely worth a look. So, as always, my name is Chad Lehrman, your host, and this has been Urban Legends Unmasked. Until next time.